and welcome to the second webinar for the Energy Democracy Project Refocus campaign launch, reimagined energy for our communities right here in the US, Turtle Island. And just a little brief reminder as we're getting started, just want you to take a moment while we're gathering to do whatever you need to do to help you be present and make the most of our time together. We'll be doing quite a bit of learning. We'll be doing quite a bit of storytelling and reflection as we try to figure out how to tell our stories in a way that connects each other so we can build more of our collective power. We really welcome you to choose however you want to be in the space so it can best support your learning. You can sit, stand, lay down, move around, whatever you like. Decide how you want to communicate with the space here. There may be distraction on your computer or in the room you're in that you want to remove. And you might want to grab a drink or a snack or gather some writing material. This is the right time to do it. And just a little reminder that you can feel free to use the chat throughout to comment, ask questions, raise your hands. We have Leah here from Race Forward doing a lot of tech support. Thank you, Leah. And Selena here also helping hold a lot of space. So with that, I also need to turn on our closed caption. Translate enable, great. With that, we're just going to do a quick welcome. If you haven't done it already, Leah's been dropping in chat to please change your name to your name, pronouns, organization. So then we all know who's talking and who's talking about from what organization. And Energy Democracy Project is a collaboration of 40 different energy democracy organizations working together. Many of you might be wearing different hats, but please make sure to use the organizations you're officially representing on the Energy Democracy Project as we're collaborating to tell our stories together, because we'll be doing some fun stuff together. Let me know if you have any issues, tech issues, renaming yourself. Please drop in chat or unmute yourself. We can help support you. We're going to be doing some time, spending some time learning with each other. And also just to support those who might not be able to follow a bunch of different things. When you speak, please remember to say your name whenever you start speaking out loud. It'll be even helpful if you can say your name, your organization. So for example, you can start, if I unmute myself, I say, hi, this is Crystal with Energy Democracy Project. Blah, 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 blah. Here's my comment. And please make sure only one person is speaking at a time. And at any time, you can ask whomever is speaking to slow down by dropping in chat, or even just unmute yourself and say, hey, can you please slow down? I know I'm probably speaking a little fast here. I know I'm always moving a little fast. So good reminder for me to slow down too. So now here, as we're coming together, we're here to be with each other. So the first thing we're going to do is get into a breakout room. So we're just going to do a little check-in and give some time for you to meet somebody in this amazing space called Energy Democracy Project. It's a 3-minute breakout session that you can meet one person, and you could just start to get into the creative side of your brain today. So we hope this is a fun challenge for each of you to really talk about, how do you define energy? How do you define energy? Leah is going to create breakout groups for all of us. Please, again, start by a brief introduction to your new friend or old friend with your name, organization, and location, and then share how you define energy. And there will be a 30-second countdown before close. And so we'll also give you like a little time check mark, but make sure it's about 1.5 minutes for each of you to share, so we have enough time for the other person. We'll be sending out notes. So Leah, let us know when you're ready for the breakout group. All right, see the thumbs up. Let's go. Welcome back. Hello, hello, hello. Hello, so great seeing your beautiful faces. Great, so as we're all trickling back here, it looks like some people are still, okay, I think that's it. Great, as we're all trickling back here, just wanted to ground yourself in a high level view of what are we doing together here? As you all know at this point from a number of emails from Selena, our wonderful campaign coordinator for Refocus campaign, Refocus is a campaign about how we need to have a reimagined energy for our communities right here in the US, Turtle Island. And this call is really just about creating a stronger narrative around energy democracy, how energy democracy is about bringing justice, such as community access and control to local renewable energy alternatives and equity to clean energy solution. A lot of us are really tired of fighting against utility scale clean energy while fighting against fossil fuel. And this is the place that we are building our narrative power. We are all about community empowerment. It's about local communities taking in their own hands the responsibility of building a cleaner and more equitable future. So this campaign is positioned to support you in your local organization, grassroots work, in driving this movement forward, because all of us are doing amazing energy democracy work, navigating the contradictions on the ground. How do we connect our fights together so we can push back on this billionaire industry while highlighting the parallels of our organizing from Alaska all the way to Puerto Rico? What this is not about the status quo centralized energy model in which energy development, control, ownership, and decision-making really resides in Wall Street and corporate utilities. So this is what we're here doing, and Energy Democracy Project has been doing amazing things together. Thanks to y'all, we're a collaboration doing cool stuff like the Utility Justice Playbook, the congressional briefing with the Energy Democracy Policy Platform, just to name a few. Right now we have another playbook that's been brewing. So this is a narrative campaign that's for the first time we're launching to support the work that you are doing. So now the way we're going to be spending our time together, here's a little agenda on the screen. We've just gone through check-ins, welcome, and high-level review. We will be really doing a quick brief recap of what we've done last week with the webinar number 1. So if you came to webinar number 1, you can do a little recap, or if you missed it, you kind of can get a little catch up. And then we can really talk about how to make things happen and then tell our stories. So with that, I'm going to hand the mic over to Selena to walk us through the rest.
Thanks, Crystal. Hi, everyone. I'm Selena. I use she, her pronouns. Really excited to see all of you here. As Crystal mentioned, I'm going to walk everyone through a quick recap of what happened on last week's webinar. Hopefully it's a nice refresher for folks who did attend, and also a quick recap for folks who didn't. So let's jump right into it. I'm going to set you up with a little bit of context as to how we even got here. I'll walk through the last 5 years of context. In 2018, in California, we saw the world's costliest disaster that year when investor-owned utilities, specifically Pacific Gas and Electric, caused wildfires that decimated communities and left many in the state unable to breathe without N95 masks. In Alaska, or actually in Puerto Rico, we saw a post-Hurricane Maria island still struggling to be supported with basic needs. And you can see in this picture, blue tarps dotting the rooftops that were provided by FEMA at the time. Then in Alaska, we saw a 7.0 earthquake that cut power for some 30,000 customers and led to hundreds of reports of natural gas leaks. 2 years later, in 2020, of course, we saw COVID-19 pandemic hitting worldwide, impacting frontline low-income communities the hardest. We also saw mounting energy debt. In March 2021, residential and small business customers were projected to owe between $35 billion to $40 billion to their utilities, according to the National Energy Assistance Directors Association. And of course, we see untethered capitalism continuing, the poor are getting poorer while the rich are getting richer. And now here we are in 2022, where the pandemic continues. We also have climate change that's hitting all of us. I know some of us most recently have been feeling the effects of wildfires, of extreme heat. And in this photo, we have a fire that hit earlier this year where one of our Energy Democracy Project collaborators in New Mexico had to be evacuated from their home. And one more photo, we see blackouts being caused by this extreme weather and the forecast for blackouts being rather grim. And so I don't really want to paint a super dark picture, but what I do want everyone to walk away from this webinar is the alignment on the idea that at the center of all of this is the extractive economy. And this extractive economy primary purpose is the accumulation, concentration, and enclosure of wealth and power. And given the scale, pace, and implications of ecological erosion and the consequent collapses of the biological and cultural diversity upon which all of our collective well-being depends, we must realign the purpose of this economy with our beloved Earth and for our communities. And so we're all here because we understand the centralized energy model to be part of this extractive economy. And as collaborators, we are all working towards a decentralized, democratized, equitable, safe, resilient, reliable, and sustainable model. I think this is a pretty beautiful vision, and I think all of you think the same too, and that's why you're here. And so that's why, in responding to this alignment, the REFOCUS campaign was born, Reimagine Energy for our communities in the United States. We're answering the call for solidarity from Alaska to Puerto Rico, and we see all of you all across the country. See these yellow dots popping up, and we all are aligned because we understand the broad significance to frontline communities across the US, which, like Puerto Rico, are confronting an extractive form of energy development. And so the big question is, which we're seeing from a lot of community members, is what is energy democracy? The vast majority of people don't know, and we are in a moment of building this movement for energy democracy. And we can go back to the next slide, because we're using an equation for a winning campaign that combines strategic messaging and relevant tactics, these tactics being tools and a demand. For the tools, we've got digital media templates. We've got zines that will be coming out in September. We've got $20,000 of financial support, which some of you who attended last week were able to chime in on. We've got narrative knowledge sharing and training, which we're doing in real time, story banking and sharing, which we'll do today, a digital communication strategy rolling out with the help of Climate Nexus, our partner, and a microsite. And as for the demand, this is the current draft that has been put together by the incredible education subcommittee and the planning committee at large of the REFOCUS campaign. That by the end of 2022, the Biden administration will direct FEMA and HUD to earmark existing funding for distributed energy resources, rooftop solar, batteries, and storage, as well as support the 1.5 million customers on Puerto Rico, prioritizing funding to low to moderate income communities who are left behind during hurricane recovery and bear the brunt of climate crises. And by the end of this campaign, we've got some pretty exciting outcomes that are part of our larger goal. We want to build awareness of reflected struggles from Puerto Rico all across the country. We're working to unify collaborators of this project and align us together in the move towards energy democracy. We'd like to build sustained strategic capacity for energy justice groups across the country. We hear you, we see you, we're responding to you and supporting you. We want to identify shared narratives around a utility justice model within the project. And in alignment with our demand, we want to pressure the US government to use the FEMA funds for energy democracy in Puerto Rico. And in the chat, Crystal just popped the visual representation of the strategy here. There's a lot of language there, there's a lot of copy, but the hope is that you can go ahead and bookmark this, check it out, feel free to share feedback, add in ideas as to how you think we can build this movement up even stronger. All right, let's move on to the next slide. So that was last week. We've got point A, which is basically the context of the campaign, why we're here, what this campaign is meant to produce, and over to point B. And I'll pass it over to Crystal to talk us through how we're going to get there.
Yes. So how we're going to get there, as we saw, that formula of strategic messaging and the relevant tactics, we can just show that formula. The next thing is the plus sign is the stories. And that is what we're here to do together. But what kind of stories are we trying to tell? Because we have different, there's so many ways to share the energy democracy struggle. We can talk about clean energy, we can talk about racial justice, we can talk about democracy, we can talk about all sorts of things like a connection to the living system. Anyway, there's so many ways to connect it. So how are we going to do it in a way that's strategic and build power? With stories. And what is the story that is going to align all of us Here, last week, we actually reviewed a little bit of the key messaging. So here, just a little update and review for what we have shared last time. I'm not going to go through the details. So if we could just, given that we're a little short on time, we're just, actually, might as well, yeah. So, might as well just have folks help us read this one by one for us. If somebody can unmute yourself and read the bullet point that's on the screen, since we just talked a whole lot.
Yep, sure, I can do it. From Alaska to Puerto Rico, frontline communities are leading the transition to energy justice by advancing reimagined energy systems.
Thank you, Erica. And the next point, we have 4 total. So please feel free to hop in. There are 4 total, 3 more.
I can take this one. The status quo, centralized colonial energy model negatively impacts frontline communities and fails to provide the energy needed to live, especially in the face of climate disaster.
Thank you, Kathy. And the third point, what is it that we want?
Sure, I've got it. A decentralized renewable energy model is the pathway to energy justice and key to successfully providing safe, affordable, and reliable energy, in addition to ensuring energy systems that are resilient, sustainable, and equitable.
Thank you so much, Mitty. And last, but certainly not least, that wraps it all up. If somebody could do this for us.
It's time we reimagine energy for our communities to create new systems that advance justice.
Thank you, Nicole. And it is time. That's what we're doing together with this campaign. So last week, when we reviewed this key messaging, which is through many years of hard work, from all the insight gathered from the strategic convenings to the process of creating the values and purpose documents that creates a foundation of tying together what we're here to do as an energy democracy project. We produce this key messaging that as a way to figure out how to thread together all of our very diverse fight geographically, racially, and culturally. So for the next slide, you can see that we have this is a result of the little feedback that we got last week. We did a little poll to see how aligned folks feel. We got 88% from most component aligned to 100% aligned. And we were able to check in with those who did not feel so aligned. If we go to the next slide, you can see just a gathering of the poll results from when we first shared it with you all here. And we had the chance to check in with the people who dropped in the 2 and 3 to make sure we all feel comfortable in moving forward, because we are moving forward together, constantly getting feedback. We are building stuff together so that everything we do is coming from the grassroots, for the grassroots, and by the grassroots. All of us are doing grassroots work, or most of us are doing grassroots work with some support from national groups here. And the last slide is the feedback from the messaging, the 4th point. And now what we are going to do is, well, actually first I'm going to drop in chat, just in case you want to learn more about the background of the key messaging. And huge shout out to the education team to put together this amazing key messaging document. And that's specifically People Power Solar Cooperative, Local Clean Energy Alliance, Co-op Power, Emerald Cities Collaborative, and Southern Echo for engaging in this process. I really hope we did. Oh, and yeah, I hope I didn't forget anyone here. So now what we're going to do is to give you a sense, if we can just move forward 1 more slide or 2 more slides. I want to see how you feel about this key messaging. I know it's no longer on the slide. What we're going to do here is, since everything we're doing is cultural, we're trying to tell stories and move people by the feelings. We're calling on the minions to help us in expression today. So we wanted to hear how you're feeling after reviewing this messaging. I know it's a little fast, so if you can click on the link that I drop in chat, you can then see the Google Doc for the full message with the 4 points and then a little background. But we want to just get a sense of how you're feeling. Happy, sad, frustrated, touched, Just want to type in chat from the number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 that matches the minion that best reflect how you feel right now. We'll love to see how you're feeling. Great, got a Nicole for 2. That is yay. We got Naya for 3, Elena for 1, Kathy for 3. So yeah, please share with us how you're feeling. It's important to get a sense of where everyone's at with this messaging as we're moving through things. So we got a 6. Yeah, this is real. And we have 2, 3, 1. Okay, so it looks like we're generally a 1, 2, 3, and some with 6. Great. Well, we want to hear from you. So for somebody who's really feeling this yay 1 feeling, can you express what this mean to you?
If someone wants to unmute and maybe share a little bit more background as to why you chose what you chose, we'd love to hear it. All right, no one wants to share, that's okay. I just want to share, I was feeling number 3 at this. I just want to acknowledge the amount of work that's gone into the development of this key messaging from the planning committee, as well as the work that you all have done in reviewing this key messaging, providing your feedback. This is a sort of feedback loop that's going to help make sure that we're actually providing the resources that you can use and that can actually be leveraged in your day-to-day organizing and support across the country. So thank you all so much. And feel free, again, to share more feedback either in the chat or directly to us. We're always down to hear how you're feeling. Minion memes are very welcome. All right, we'll move on to the next slide. And so we're going to talk about sharing our stories today. As Crystal mentioned, we're trying to weave in some of these cultural aspects into our deck because stories are a cultural thing. A lot of the ways in which we perceive and move through the world is through stories. But before we dive into the full-on creative mode, we're going to do a little exercise and go back to the breakout groups where you get to go into a one-on-one conversation with someone new. You're going to share a story about a time that you felt powerful. This is going to be a 6-minute total breakout group, so you have a little bit of time to share your story. We're going to give you warnings on time while you're in the breakout group, but really feel free to share whatever comes up for you. It doesn't even have to be about organizing. It doesn't have to be about energy. We just want to get you into the feeling of sharing something that's coming from an intuitive place for you. All right, Leah's going to pop over to the breakout rooms quite soon, so you should be seeing the notification coming up on your screen. All right, our folks coming back. Let's see, I think everyone might be back. All right, as we settle back into the main room, I know we've sort of been running a mile a minute with throwing a lot of information your way, with sharing information with your collaborators on this call. So just go ahead and take a second, take a deep breath. As Crystal mentioned, if you need anything, snacks, if you need a longer break, this is the space to do it. And we're going to jump into a 1-minute solo reflection. And we're inviting you to think through what makes a story memorable for you. How do you feel after telling your story? How do you feel after listening to a story? This can be a solo reflection, silent. You can write it down, but we won't be sharing out on this one. All right, let's come back into the room. Now, you might be wondering, why are we having you go through storytelling and story sharing? Why are we even having you think through this reflection period? And as I mentioned prior to our activity, stories are so important about the ways in which we perceive the world. Going into the next slide, I'm going to walk you through the significance of stories to our work and why we're even going through this storytelling exercise. So the first photo is going to pop up. It's gonna maybe be familiar to some of you. Maybe you'll see your faces there. And there's a story there. You know, we had over 35 collaborators from across the country join in the middle of a global pandemic prolific heat waves, and untethered capitalism. And for 90 minutes, we shared smiles, we shared space, we shared ideas to build this movement. That's a pretty beautiful story. The next example is one of my favorite movies of all time, the story of Selena Quintanilla, starring Jennifer Lopez. I couldn't help but put in this movie because I think it's just a really wonderful example of the ways in which movies, film, radio, television shapes our perception of the world around us. This story in particular, if you want to drop an emoji up in the chat and go ahead and show your love for Selena. But this is a story about a girl who had a dream and courage to make it come true. So love that movie. Cultural references building back into this slide deck. In the next image, we've got an example of how stories build movements. Rosa Parks' refusal to change seats. We have another example here of Standing Rock water protectors and the incredible organizing of Indigenous leadership for water. We also see stories that are spun to fit narratives that block people power. Here we see an example that says, "Protect tomorrow today." This is a branding campaign behind ExxonMobil, and they're one of the world's largest publicly traded international oil and gas companies. And we look at these photos and we already see characters, we already see narratives, antagonists, and conclusions. And whether we like it or not, stories shape our perception of the world around us. I love seeing the emojis in the chat of the happiness around seeing your faces, around seeing the movie poster for Selena, the boo hiss, around seeing Protect Tomorrow Today. Stories incite emotion. So we're going to apply some of that in this call a little bit deeper. We're going to go into the story-based strategy that's provided by the Center for Story-Based Strategy and Race Forward. Shout out to Race Forward, to Leah, the full team for supporting us in this process. And we're going to jump through a narrative power analysis. And Vina, yes, thanks Vina for joining. It's good to see you today. Our narrative power analysis can help us understand the story we're trying to change, identify the underlying assumptions that allow that story to operate as truth, and find the points of intervention in the story where we can challenge, we can change, or we can insert a new story. Our narrative power analysis is so central in shaping our stories in a way that makes our work irresistible and memorable. And it's what really helps us shift movements. Let's go over to the next slide. If we're able to understand where the antagonist or the villain is trying to shape a story, going back to the example of the ExxonMobil Protect Tomorrow Today, we can really position in ourselves of thinking through how to be counter to the status quo. Our organizing strategy should ask the question, what if another world was possible? What if the power was held by the people? And what if we won? If we're able to identify the points of assumption where the endings become contestable by the power holders, we can effectively forecast a different future that's rooted in justice. Now, of course, this sort of vision-driven action is not a new thing and have arguably always been a part of successful social change. But by understanding them as interventions at points of assumption, we can focus on what has made them successful and where we can replicate the aspects of successful organizing. And if we're able to understand where the villain or the antagonist is shaping their story, we can aim to reclaim the narrative for ourselves that's untethered from the confines of the power holders' framing and introduce new ideas, new possibilities, new solutions, and even new identities and ways of being. We can paint the pictures of the characters, their foreshadowed victory, and the outcomes. In our narrative power analysis and story-based strategy, there's 5 key elements. We're just going to name them all today to be respectful of the theory. The first is conflict. This is the backbone of the narrative. This is what defines the drama, the point of view, and what makes the story interesting. Number 2 is characters, subjects, protagonists, narrators of stories. We've got imagery, words to capture imagination with metaphor, anecdote, and descriptions that make the story tangible. We have foreshadowing, which is the ways that a story provides hints to its outcome. And we have underlying assumptions. These are unstated parts of the story that must be accepted in order to believe that the narrative is true. And for today, we're only going to be focusing on 3 aspects just for the sake of time. It's going to be conflict, characters, and underlying assumptions. And in the same way that we walked you through the context of history that brought us all here together in the struggle for energy democracy, we each need to understand why we're here in our own respective organizing and locality. Who are we fighting against? How are they fighting against us? And ultimately, how can we win? And stories are going to help us shape this perception. Moving forward, we're going to jump right into one example of how we can leverage the story-based strategy. The example of Puerto Rico, which is one of the key struggles that we're highlighting in the REFOCUS campaign. In order to analyze how to intervene in the centralized energy struggle on PR, we must understand the narrative story that is pushed by the opposite side, by our opponents. We're going to walk through conflict, characters, and underlying assumptions. Again, just 3 aspects for the sake of time today. All right, jumping into conflict. Can we do a little popcorn here? I'd love to get some other voices in the room. If you feel called, please do unmute yourself and read this first sentence.
The Puerto Rican grid is in disrepair.
Awesome. Can someone else read this next sentence?
After decades of abandonment by the Puerto Rico Electric Power Authority, PREPA, Luma Energy has worked to repair, reconstruct, and restore the electrical system of Puerto Rico.
Luma's mission to build a more reliable, more resilient, and cleaner energy system is deeply personal and rooted in the belief that Puerto Rico has a bright future.
Thank you all. So this is the conflict. This is what the villain, our opponent, is putting out in Puerto Rico. And one thing that I do want to note before we move forward is in understanding the ways in which the villain is framing this narrative, we're going to be that better positioned to be able to counter this narrative. And one thing that doesn't quite feel good, but I'd like to share with this group is that we haven't been winning. You know, all of us are resource stricken, we're burnt out. We're hearing from our Energy Democracy Project collaborators that times are tough. And in order for us to win, we need to know what it is that the status quo power holders are doing that is winning. This is just one example of the type of narrative that's really easy to catch on to, that's absorbable, that's digestible, and that's palatable to maybe some of the other power holders that they're allied with. What does the villain say to the masses? What do they put out to sound as sweet as possible? And so it's our duty to figure out how to counter this narrative, be able to articulate what the opposition is saying so that we can position our story as more irresistible, as more memorable, and as more tangible as possible. All right, moving on to the next aspect. Number 2 is characters. In the framing of Luma Energy's version of the story, we've got 4 key characters. Number 1 is Luma, which in their eyes, you know, they're a customer-centric energy provider on the island that exists for one purpose: to serve the people of Puerto Rico. And from the website, they say, working together, our Luma team is making real progress every day across Puerto Rico. We're building a more reliable, more resilient, more customer-focused, and cleaner energy system for all of our customers and their families. It's kind of interesting how some of that messaging sometimes matches our messaging as well. So let's just note that in the back of our head as the ways in which the power holders are able to exploit the narrative. The second character is PREPA, Puerto Rico Electric Power Authority. It's a public-private partner, and PREPA chose Luma in 2021 after the declaration of bankruptcy, and now leverages Luma as a more reliable, more resilient, more customer-focused, and cleaner energy system provider. All right, the third character is FEMA. This is the funder of nearly 200 development projects on the island. And FEMA states that Puerto Rico's electric generation, transmission, and distribution system is on its way to becoming more robust with the approval of funds for many projects. Luma Energy and FEMA work quite closely together because a lot of the funding is provided directly by FEMA. And the last character that we want to highlight in this story from the perspective of Luma Energy are Puerto Ricans and Puerto Rican residents. These are all customers of Luma. And in the words of Luma, our team is made up of 3,000 plus hardworking men and women who call Puerto Rico home. We work hard every day to prioritize the right actions to build a better energy future for our 1.5 million customers, from improving safety to increasing reliability to offering the best customer service possible. Serving you is our daily mission. It's interesting how they start to weave in some of these community aspects, the focus on people, these issues of reliability, which many Puerto Ricans are demanding. All right, let's go into the final section, underlying assumptions. We'll click into the first phrase. Puerto Rico needs Luma to optimize power to the island via their partnership. Without Luma taking leadership, the island will suffer continued disrepair. It's assumption, and it's an assumption that Luma Energy is directly in alignment with. Next up is the assumption that a wholesale shift to renewable power sources will introduce new doubts for reliability. Puerto Rico would be a test case. There is no predecessor to this system that showcases the success of renewable energy at a wide scale, let alone distributed renewable energy at a wide scale. Another underlying assumption that Luma Energy is aligned with. And the last one that we can highlight is the assumption that a move away from Luma's leadership would mean unreliability for the island. It might mean the continuation of failing and aging equipment, blackouts in the face of hurricanes, heat waves, and continual natural disasters on the island. All right, so now we've got our overview of conflict, of characters, and of underlying assumptions. It's just an abridged version of one version of a story that might be pushed out by Luma Energy. We did the research to find out what Luma Energy is putting out into the world and understanding what sort of sweet narrative they're putting out to make sure that they come out as the protagonist in all of this as they pursue profit. Let's go into the next slide. I'm going to pause here for a bit of a share out. Would love to hear what you all think about some themes that you see represented in this story. What's something that might be similar to your community? Let's start to tie these threads together. If you feel called, do unmute yourself or feel free to type into chat.
Transitioning to renewables and distributed renewables is too risky and expensive.
Thanks for sharing, Chris.
Yeah, that's pretty much the same narrative that the Business Council and fossil fuel interests have been using to try and undermine the Climate Leadership and Community Protection Act measures that people are going to be forced to buy unaffordable heat pumps and you'll probably be cold.
Yeah, it's like they're really leveraging a narrative of fear because they know people don't want to be cold. They know people don't want to be in blackouts and really trying to position themselves as the only ones who are able to decide the fate of comfort and survival.
They're taking advantage of the fact that people don't have access to other information easily, and they just have a huge megaphone. Every time you go to a gas pump with one of those little video screens on it, you see an ad about this.
Yeah. I see in the chat that Al highlighted that we can substitute PG&E for Luma, and you have the same story. Pacific Gas and Electric is out here in Northern California. Nicole said opposition starting to utilize parts of our narrative. Yeah, lots of exploitation there. Yesenia shares the utility company knows better is just looking out for us. Puya mentioned there's a constant theme that IOUs are the only real way to assure a reliable grid. Yeah. And Erica also affirmed that advancing this theme of a lack of options, i.e. the energy company is the only way forward. Yeah, there's really like this idea of them as the pinnacle of what can happen, as them as the only power holders in this situation. There is no alternative. Everyone else is fly by night or a scam, Marianne shared. Mitty mentioned decentralizing is too risky. You need large, well-resourced entities to manage something as important as your energy needs. Yeah. It's so interesting how we see a lot of these themes play out across the country. And this is something that's really central to the REFOCUS campaign. We're starting to see the villains leveraging the same playbook that, I mean, a lot of you have done a lot of work to research as well. And now we're just up against this mountain of Goliath in a way. Pete also mentioned it places blame on the public/people for the disrepair that got us here. Yeah, that's true. There's this interesting narrative against public entities and entities that are held by the people.
Hi, this is Puya. I just want to also add one other thing. There's this also theme that utilities use that this is too complicated. Let us handle it. The barrier to entry for information is too high. We have the engineers, we have this huge staff, you all don't. So that's a constant thing as well that we hear.
Yeah, thanks for sharing, Puya. Absolutely. Many mentioned that choice comes at a cost. Look at the con games by many small energy providers in states that have allowed choice. Mitty himself has personally experienced such a scam. Dang, sorry, Mitty. I mean, we're all being scammed, you know, and the masses are being scammed, and you know, a lot of us don't even have a choice. In the case of PG&E, we have no choice but to be paying our bills to PG&E, to have PG&E as our main energy provider. Yeah, and in California, we also have cost shift claims that are being pushed forward by PG&E. All right, well, thank you for sharing all. I think, again, just really interesting and also really angering that there are these common themes. And now we're going to start to apply this same practice in our own organizing and in our own struggles with our own localities. If we go back into the deck, I've got a screenshot of a worksheet that we're all going to be entering soon, but we've developed this for all of us to work on in our time together. It's going to be very brief, and our hope is that this narrative power analysis provides you with one extra tool in the toolkit to amplify and shape your story and highlight that key point of intervention that will break down the power of those we're organizing against. For today, for the sake of time, we're only going to be working on the status quo for now. So this is painting the conflict, characters, and assumptions of your villain, of your antagonist. We have also heard from a lot of people after webinar number 1 that they don't really feel like they have a story to tell. And I'd love to push back on that idea, because for today, this can be a deeply personal story about your relationship as an individual with your local utility company or co-op, or maybe a company that's inflicting harm in your community, or it can even be about an exploitative landlord. Really, so boundless. What we want you all to think through is, what is the status quo power holder using as a narrative to push forward? I think we're all drawn to this work for different reasons, so feel free to use our time together to paint a picture of conflict, of characters, and assumptions that is personal to you. All right, getting into story-based strategy, we're gonna pop this link into chat. Go ahead and click on it. We're gonna have 5 minutes to work on this together. And as we adopt this framework and put it into practice, it's gonna get easier over time. Feel free to let me know in the chat if you have any issues accessing this document. This is something that will live automatically in your own drive. And go ahead and type directly into that worksheet. 5 minutes, and we'll see you back at, it'll be 1:04 for Pacific Standard, I think 3:04 if you're in Central, and 4:04 if you're in Eastern. All right, welcome back, everyone. Hope the worksheet was all right. Can I get some emojis on your screens to let me know how it went? Any emoji is okay. I see a thumbs up from Naya. Awesome. People still working on their workbooks. We can go back to the main screen, actually, just of everybody. We don't have to go right into. I think we're going to end up taking a little bit of a break afterwards. Any other emojis people want to share how they're feeling, how to go? Would love to see thumbs up.
It's a smiley face from Cassandra.
Thumbs up from Kathy. Awesome. Any other reactions? All right, well, I hope the silence means that you're deep in reflection mode and you're putting some more thoughts on paper, maybe creating 2 or 3 stories. Oh, Marianne shared that she's still working. All right, so we are actually really great on time today. So we know that Thursdays are usually pretty busy and you're wrapping stuff up before the weekend hits. So we're gonna give you a 5-minute break. It is 1:05 where I am, Pacific Standard Time, and I'm gonna be back here at 1:10, and I'll meet you back here. 5 minutes. Feel free to continue working on your worksheet if you'd like, take a break, grab a snack, but we'll be back in 5. See you at the 10-minute mark. All right, welcome back, everyone. Hope you had a great break, and I hope you've also been able to sit with some of the information that you put down in your narrative analysis tool, filling out the status quo side of the worksheet. We're going to jump into a share out mode with breakout groups once again, groups of 2. You're going to share your narrative power analysis with a partner. We put aside 10 minutes on the clock so that you can go ahead and take your time, share out what you've written, and maybe you can also share some feedback with one another. Identify those common themes that you have between those 2 stories and really start to put into practice these fundamental elements of the Refocus campaign in answering that call for solidarity all across the country. So Leah's going to be setting that up for you all quite soon. I see that Solidarity had to bump off. And Danielle's gonna have to hop off. Thank you all for joining. All right, and folks should be seeing those notifications coming up soon.
Hello, welcome back, everyone. Like Selena said, in order for us to win, we need to be able to articulate what the opposition is saying. So I'm glad you had the time to share some stories about what your opposition is saying, just so we can position our story as more irresistible, more memorable, and more tangible. So where we're going from now is we're going to be gathering stories from you so that we can tell our story in a powerful way. And we're going to show that worksheet again. In fact, what you could do, what we'd really love for you to do, if you had the chance to work on the status quo piece, it'd be really great if you can drop your link to the chat just so we can have a sense of what you're fighting as we're getting stories for the website and reach out to you for more information. If you can just drop your link to the worksheet that you were working on into the chat, then I basically request access if you don't give me the access, if you have another chance to share the access. And that what's going to happen next is what if. We're going to be talking about how you're going to tell your stories. I would love this is basically an extra toolkit to amplify your story, highlight the key points for intervention that will break down the power of those who are organizing against our work and oppressing our people. So we're really love for you to spend some time to look at the what if piece. And we'll be working on 5 different channels as we shared last week, where we'll be going into, if we can go into the next slide, we'll be going into, we're currently producing a zine, we're going to have a website and featuring your story, we're going to have social media campaigns, we'll do press release, and then other things that will highlight your stories as a way to showcase what energy democracy really looks like. And if you're ready to share your story or just talk to someone, Ernesto from Co-op Power is working on, is actually working to interview you one-on-one. And I'm going to drop in chat the calendar for Ernesto. So for you to get on his calendar and do a one-on-one interview with him. And I think that it'll be great for you to chat with him. That's a great way for us to gather your stories, and we can continue to build our collective stories together as you continue to do the amazing work you do. So far, we've had one-on-one interviews with 7 different project collaborators, and we're really excited to be gathering more. And what exactly does that look like? Just to get you a little excited, we're going to show you some video real quick. It's only 30-second video. And the next slide is a video that is a compilation of the stories that we've gathered.
Energy democracy is about participating in designing the energy system we want to see in our communities, one that actually works for us rather than against us or hurts us. So energy democracy is about understanding the energy system and weighing in to make it into the system we need to serve our communities.
Right, that's a very, very short video just to show you what the story could look like. There's so many ways. We're currently making a zine. We're going to be making a beautiful website to showcase your stories. So we'd love to know if you are ready to share your stories. If you are, look at Selena's last message in chat. Please have a chat with Ernesto. This is the most convenient way that we thought of for you, so you don't have to sit down and write something. All you have to do is talk to us. We'll be recording it and then try to figure out how to incorporate your content into the overall campaign. So if you can click on the link, the Calendly link for Ernesto, that would be wonderful. And so with that, now going into closing is for us, we'll really love for you to give us, take a moment to give us your feedback. We're actually moving forward now since we're getting close to close. Yeah, we're going to go into next step, fill out the survey. If folks could drop in to click on the link that I just dropped in chat, or just type in bit.ly/refocus webinar 2. We'll love for your feedback on how you think this webinar is going. The next webinar, the 3rd webinar, is likely going to be a public launch where we'll have a website, a finalized branding and zines and social media stuff, all coming together, showcasing your stories to show how we are coming together to really achieve energy justice. And that is likely happening in September. So yes, there you go. We're in September. But next week, we're going to have our Energy Democracy Project All Hands Call. It's a quarterly gathering of all the Energy Democracy Project collaborators, to come together. And in that, we'll be sharing a lot of exciting announcements from each of you, hearing from you on what's been going on with the energy democracy work across the country, as we also get some updates on the collaborative work that we've been working on together as a formation of Energy Democracy Project. And of course, while we're together, we're going to utilize the story-based strategy that we just exercised to really talk about our stories with each other and learn about the amazing work from each other. We learned one thing from the very beginning is was our gathering in Detroit, Michigan back in 2019, is that we love hearing each other's stories. In fact, we even heard about it before the gathering. That's actually got us to gather together at the Energy Democracy National Tour as an outcome for the Energy Democracy book here. So it's been a ongoing genetics of ours to want to tell each other stories and really build that power together and build the movement. So it would be great if you can join us. I just sent an email earlier this morning to do this. And I think the last thing I want to, if you haven't shared the your feedback on the webinar too, please do that. Again, fill out the survey. And then also I'm dropping in chat again, the detailed, deeper energy democracy refocus campaign key messaging in chat, just so you get to have it, to get an understanding of what we're trying to achieve and how we're going to pull your story as a way to connect everyone else's story together so we can build our collective power together. And that's a wrap, everyone. We are just a minute away from the top of the hour. Thank you all so much for your presence. Really appreciate, amazing work you all are doing. We're building power together. If you would like to share what you've worked on, please drop in chat. We'll request access to you if there's no existing access. And thank you all for being here. Hope to see you on Friday next week, August 12th. Thank you all.
Great work, everyone. Good to see you. Keep it up. Bye.